So I'd like to introduce two speakers from the Midwives College of Utah in the United States, where their team is actively developing guidance, faculty training, and curriculum for the ethical use of generative AI in midwifery education. Megan Koontz is the President and Academic Dean at the Midwives College of Utah. She originally completed her midwifery training in New Zealand, where she is from, but moved to the USA over 20 years ago. She has been working in midwifery education for over 10 years and has expertise in online pedagogy, curriculum development, and integrating generative AI into midwifery education with a global perspective. Stefanie Podlog is the Graduate Dean and General Education Chair at the Midwives College of Utah, originally from Germany, where she leads evidence-informed curriculum design and institutional policy with a focus on ethical AI use in midwifery education. So I'm delighted to hand over to Megan and Stefanie.
You go ahead, Megan. Introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Koontz. I am the president of the Midwives College of Utah, which is one of the largest out-of-hospital midwifery schools in America. While our students complete their clinicals in their own communities, our didactical classroom part of the program is taught online. So you can imagine that we have a significant experience with technology and generative artificial intelligence. Welcome.
And as already mentioned, my name is Stefanie. Thank you for inviting us today so we can present on this topic. I serve as the General Education Department Chair and Graduate Dean at the Midwives College, where we regularly engage in the work around ethics and educational use of generative AI in midwifery and midwifery education. And since the release of an AI tool called ChatGPT in 2022, it has certainly been an evolving process, and our work is continuously growing with the technology and its implication as it changes, and to ground our discussion in today's reality while staying anchored in the midwifery values. Let me walk you through our agenda. Next slide, please. Thank you. For the next half hour, we will focus on midwifery for all in the age of AI by connecting the AI topic directly to the Vision 2026 theme. We will set the stage by acknowledging the current status quo of AI reality in midwifery. With the help of the midwifery lens, we will explore what generative AI is, the pros and cons of AI, while considering the use of an ethical framework with tips for practical applications. And last, we plan to wrap it up and to transition into an open Q&A round. And to connect to the broader VIDM theme, let's now have a look at how AI is currently showing up in midwifery practice and education. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if you think about your everyday life, generative AI might be a part already of it. For example, it can show up as an AI summary at the top of your search results of your browser if you don't modify your settings explicitly. And now imagine the same reality for the clients you care for, the students you educate. They may use generative AI to support their decisions related to their care or their education. And so if generative AI is already to some extent integrated into our daily lives, the questions then become, are we getting clear and reliable information or not? What are the benefits of using these tools? Who might not have access to these tools? Who may not be represented in how these tools work? And more so, how does AI impact the midwifery values and the care that midwives provide? And I think this shows that AI is not just a technology discussion for us today. It connects directly to the theme of midwifery for all of this conference, with a deep focus on equity, on access in a continuously changing care landscape. And I want to stress that with this session, it's not about promoting or rejecting AI. It is about helping to understand it a little bit better so that you can make informed decisions about if and how AI fits your practice. And to start, Megan will walk us through regarding how this looks like in the midwifery reality today. Next slide, please.
So to start with, we're just going to wind back a little bit and cover some definitions to make sure that we're all on the same page. So in the interest of the fact that we're working with AI, we're talking about AI today, I asked AI what the definition of generative AI was. So I asked the large language model, and it said, let me quote, generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content such as text, images, music, audio, or computer code rather than just analyzing or classifying existing data. So it is the backbone of things like large language models, which are therefore defined as a type of AI designed to understand, process, and generate human-like text by analyzing massive amounts of data. Think of it like a highly advanced autocomplete system that has a significant portion of that reads a significant portion of the internet, allowing it to predict what words and sentences should come next in a given context. So a large language model is built on the concept of generative AI, but there are many other applications that are built on generative AI. So what we're talking about today is the bigger picture of the artificial intelligence that creates new things in the world based on what it's been fed. So applications such as ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, Oracle, Copilot, they're examples of large language models. But we can see other examples in things like the note-taking software or the LMS, the learning management system that our school uses. Canvas has now integrated something that they call Ignite AI into that, and that is built on a generative AI framework. So there's a lot of different tools that are coming out of this backbone of generative AI. So as Stefanie has mentioned, generative AI is already here. It's not coming. It is always growing and expanding, but it's in America, it's almost in everyday use. So we can use it in search engines, we use it in emails, we use it when we're doing grammar checks or spelling checks. And in a lot of situations, it's used in electronic health records in America daily. It's kind of seamlessly woven into these tools. So in countries like this, banning it doesn't become an option because it's already here and it's the backbone of a lot of things that people don't recognize that's going on in behind it. For example, when I was home recently, so I'm originally from New Zealand, when I went home recently, my stepmother was talking about a visit that she had taken to her doctor, where in the background they had a transcriber that was using generative AI that was taking notes. And she was talking about how when she was talking with her doctor would respond in a way designed for the generative AI to catch the notes. So an example was, so where's the pain? And she would say, oh, the pain's right here. And so the doctor said, oh, so the pain's in your left upper shoulder, left shoulder. And that was designed so that generative AI can kind of catch notes. And that was just a normal part of a doctor's visit in New Zealand at that time. I wasn't pregnant, so I didn't visit any midwives, but it's possible they're already working with tools. For example, Taki Scribe is one that they're using, and Heidi Health are both generative AI applications that are built on the platform to transcribe and create automatic notes. We also can't forget that much of midwifery is still advocacy. So we're still having conversations around what does midwifery mean and the importance of midwifery. We're fighting for appropriate access and recognition, and using large language models in creating content can be a big support in these kind of roles. However, despite this use that I recognize as I look around my world, it's important to note that there's this massive gap between what is experienced in some places in some countries in the world and other countries. Over 72 countries do have some form of policy or regulation. But many of those countries have voluntary regulations and they're not very enforced. About 25% of the world lives under an AI ban. So that's places like China or Russia where AI is banned from the country completely. But there are other countries and many in the many in the European Union where they have more regulations around things like around the use of AI and recognition software. And then even in some states in America, there's regulations that are different from other places. So this differing in regulations can create a feeling of different trust of the AI in general and of this technology. So with this, it's important that in an educational context, we need to be clear how we are integrating AI into the learning environment so that we're supporting future midwives, but that we're open and clear, I guess, about where we're going with it. So with this, in the educational context, to know the pros and cons is a very important part, and to be aware of them and therefore make decisions on them. So just covering some of them today. Generally, AI can be used to help students navigate a better and more individualized learning environment. So it can create things like individual student support, and in particular support for students who can benefit from assistance in working with words and language. So there's a number of tools that are based around supporting students with dyslexia, for example, or supporting students who struggle with writing. It can also assist faculty in creating courses and creating assignments and workflows and reducing the mental load of regular tasks in a clinical setting. So things like ordering supplies or planning a schedule if we're working in birth centers or we're working in a place where midwives are scheduled in. Things like this can be really supported in the midwifery context with AI, and it can allow us some time and space to do the other things that we'll talk about later. However, we have to be honest about the cons that exist within generative AI. Generative AI can create what's called hallucinations, which is that it can give quite convincing answers that are not necessarily true. It is built on the information that is currently fed into the system, and sometimes we know that the information that's currently fed into the system is not accurate. As midwives, we're well aware of the overarching model that exists in the world and the space that there is for alternatives, and those alternatives don't necessarily get raised in an environment where the application is scanning for the most likely response. It's not going to give us the response necessarily that a midwife would choose. As I said, the AI is as good as the information it gets fed. As providers, we need to take responsibility and learn how to navigate AI in order to make this gap. I went to the doctor yesterday, maybe the day before, and I asked my doctor a question, and the doctor then just jumped on the computer and she Googled it, and she even said, "Oh, an AI says blah 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 about my question," and that for me is a little bit of what we've called here the accountability gap for providers, in that we can't just like any other form of research, we can't just take what one piece of that research says and decide to move with it. There has to be an understanding of the bigger picture and pulling it back into the way that we do research and the way that we incorporate learning into our system. So it's vital that providers don't see AI as having all of the answers, that it's treated like a tool like any other research method. It's also important to recognize that not only we talked about how different countries have different levels of access, but that just different people have different levels of access, different generations, different economic backgrounds, different areas within a country also have different accessibility. And so if we're looking in the educational context, it's important to note that no two students in our midwifery classrooms have got a similar relationship with AI either. And this might change in the future, this understanding of AI or this use of AI, but we're not there. We're not there yet. It's also important to recognize the environmental impact of AI. We acknowledge the high energy costs and the environmental impact that these massive applicant models are having on the current landscape. And all of this adds up to our recommendation to take a stance, to not be reactive, but to rather take some time to consider the use of your technology right now, when you can look into the information and when you can decide how much and how you want to use this technology for yourself.
Thank you, Megan. Now, given that we just listened about like the benefits, the downsides, and the need and the invitation to define our own stance, let's turn to like a practical framework that can guide you how you make decisions about AI use in midwifery education. And again, when Megan and I talk about your AI stance, we mean that the position that you as an individual, your institution, possibly a country takes on regarding if and how AI should be used or integrated, including what's allowed and what's limited, what safeguards there are in place. As Megan already mentioned, that stance looks very different depending on where you are in the world. By early 2026, more than 70 countries have introduced over 1,000 AI policies. As already mentioned, some range from strict laws with enforcements, other are voluntary guidelines with little oversight. Other countries completely banned it. For example, the European Union has introduced the EU AI Act, which classifies AI into different levels, from banned users to minimal risk applications. As already mentioned, the United States relies on a mix of agency guidance and state level regulations, but not according to my best knowledge, not a federal law oversight. And so since we are working globally, internationally, in a space that is like uneven, evolving, sometimes unclear, is exactly why having your own guiding compass, your ethical framework matters. And thus I would like to introduce a framework that we're currently referring to. It's called the Great Key. It is, so to speak, a set of guiding principles that's designed for generative AI use in healthcare and in education. Think about it as a checklist to help you understand what to incorporate, what to consider, and just stay grounded if you choose using generative AI in your work. And the components of this checklist are logically interconnected, like puzzle pieces to guide your decision. So let's take a look. Great, please. G for governability. You stay in control. You can question or reject generative AI output. And because of that R, reliability, as Megan already mentioned, generative AI is not always correct. You need to check if the output, the answer that you're getting makes sense in your context or is correct. And equally important, E for equity, be aware of bias. Generative AI can not only be incorrect, but can also reinforce existing disparities and bias. And thus A, accountability. You are responsible for what care you provide for your clients, what work you submit as a student, and what you teach as an instructor, or if you decide using or not using generative AI. And in that context, T for traceability, be transparent about if and how AI was used. We will share an example of how to do that in short. And also definitely consider P, privacy. Do not enter sensitive or identifiable information into the conversation with your bot. This information might be used to train other AI models. And you have once it's uploaded, no control over where this information is shared and saved and recycled, so to speak, to train other models. And thus, logically, L for lawfulness, follow the relevant laws and regulations in your setting to protect sensitive patient information, client health information, privacy of student records. For example, in the US, that would be HIPAA or FERPA. E for empathy, which cannot be stressed enough. Midwifery is relational, and generative AI should not replace human connections. And we heard some interesting examples already today. And last, A, autonomy. Again, it comes back to AI can suggest. It is a tool, but you decide. It is your professional judgment in this context of evidence-informed care that is needed. This needs to stay central. This is the key and the heart of your work. And as you can see, this presentation today is not becoming an AI expert. It's more designed to encourage you to develop a clear and ethical way to think about if, when, how to use generative AI in your work. And now that we have this ethical lens, let's look at how this translates into practice and how we can actually interact with AI tools. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first, I want to describe a concrete tool that can assist you to decide the extent of generative AI use in your work. This tool is called the AI assessment scale. Very simple. It describes different levels of AI use, and so it can support you to decide if AI is appropriate at all, and if so, to what extent. It ranges simply from level 1, no AI use, to level 5, full collaboration with AI. And once that level is clear to you, and it might not be a one and all decision, you might make this decision multiple times depending on the projects you're working on. So once it's clear to you, another skill will become key to this work. If you choose to integrate and use generative AI, it's called AI prompting or prompt writing. This is the process of giving clear instructions to the generative AI tool so that you can interact with it in a meaningful way. But again, in our context, it's not just a technical way of processing information. It's an ethical and a professional skill where the great key principles that I just mentioned before, where they become visible in practice. And to understand why that matters, it helps to look at how most existing prompting frameworks have developed. When I say prompting framework, I mean simple structures, often an acronym that helps you to organize, how to initiate the conversation with this AI bot so that you can start and guide your conversation clearly instead of just simply saying, draft me a script or a recommendation for XYZ. The existing frameworks that guide such prompting, they often come from the business and the tech industry. They do intend, like all of these frameworks, to improve the clarity and the efficiency, but the focus is often to get the best answer from the bot. What it does not do, or what they do not do, is supporting the learning process, ethical reflections, and the clinical reasoning, which is very specific to midwifery. And here it becomes actually difficult for us with midwifery core values at heart. We should not just produce polished answers. If an AI polished response is just used one-on-one, it can actually be a problem if that means we're bypassing critical thinking, or we reinforce biases and disparities. And without clear guardrails, we risk to develop the habit of just simply repeating this AI confident language instead of cultivating habits of inquiry and critical thinking and fact checking. And to address this, I simply use the framework called Care Square. It helps to structure how to interact the initial conversation, how to interact and to initiate the first conversation with a bot by asking to incorporate the following components into this text box that you use to start the chat with your AI tool. The first component is C. C for setting the context to, let's say, a special or a specific clinical or educational or task, relational needs. A for defining the activity or the task that the bot should assist you with, like appraising evidence or rehearsing counseling or clinical reasoning, followed by R, definitely clarifying the roles that you either assign to the bot or yourself. Could be a cautious consultant and so forth, simulating a conversation. And it goes into E, including an equity and language check, where you task the bot to include a certain type of language that is inclusive, maybe neutral, trauma-informed, client-centered. Ask AI to flag assumptions, or if you're missing certain perspectives. And it continues and concludes with the second E, the square part, where you're prompting the bot to end with you, the user, the accountability. Your accountability. Ask the bot to identify what you must independently of the AI work to verify, to revise, to decide. Use not too many, maybe one or two reflective questions, rather than just allowing the bot to conclude the conversation and move on to the next steps. And if you like to explore this further and find an example, there is a QR code here on the slide with a short LinkedIn article that features a full example of the care square. And you can either scan the code or take the link from the reference list that we share at the video. And to close, I'll hand it back to Megan to wrap up the session and bring us back to the core of midwifery and to reflect on what this means in practice.
So midwifery is working with birthing people and with walking alongside women and birthing people throughout the birthing experience. And we use a variety of tools in order for us to do that. And AI is a tool that we can incorporate to allow us more time and space potentially to have a personal interaction with them. But the takeaway from this session for me really is around that the need for a definition, a personal definition, as Steph was saying, and a potentially an institutional definition of what this would look like for you. So AI requires intentional engagement. Otherwise, the engagement just happens in the background in ways that you may not recognize or you may not know. So these frameworks that we've talked about are designed to protect that relationship core of our work and to ensure that Midwives is serving us with equity and respecting human rights as part of it. So as part of our presentation, we're going to walk our talk and say that we acknowledge the fact that we used Notebook LM at the aligning with the level 2 that Steph was just talking about of the assessment scale. So we used Notebook LM when we generated this content and to help us collate some of the information, and that is a Google tool based on Google Gemini. And the importance of stating that is designed to build trust. So we encourage all of you to use this level of transparency and some form of acknowledgement and sharing of these models in all of your clinical and in your educational spaces. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for being in our presentation.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Stop the timer before that goes off. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to open up the questions to everybody. If there's any questions, there's nothing in the chat at the moment. But before, whilst people are thinking about it, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. So you mentioned midwifery for all, but many of us work in obviously low resource settings with limited internet or no access to paid IA tools. Won't this technology just widen that gap between those high resource and low resource midwifery settings?
Megan, you want to go ahead and take this question?
Sure, I can take it. I mean, I think that that's a real concern, and I think it's quite central to the theme that this year's conference is talking about around midwifery for all, right? How do we work with the fact that there are health disparities generally in that happen in this context, and is this tool going to increase those health disparities? And some of, I think, what we're trying to bring to the fore here is that if we don't engage intentionally with them, there is the possibility that this will happen. And so the intentional engagement is what we're looking for to try and reduce and create as with any tool, it can be used positively and negatively, right? So to create the positive impact of AI rather than the unintended consequences that might happen.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's that kind of it's that balance overall, isn't it? Because my second thought was around what you were saying, Stefanie, about still making sure that that human interaction with that empathy, midwifery is about being with women. So doesn't introducing a screen or an algorithm between us and our clients kind of destroy that human to human empathy? How can we kind of make sure that that doesn't happen?
I think, may I speak to this, if that's okay, just to add on, because it furthers the conversation. I think transparency is key here. We saw in the beginning when Megan shared some of the examples, we saw some reactions in terms of astonishing reactions or being astonished, maybe irritated or concerned about the fact that AI, I want to say, was deliberately integrated in different forms in the clinical day-to-day praxis, where it could definitely happen that clients or patients are either not aware, not informed about that, and maybe a conversation comes across as robotic when the practitioner picks up on a certain language to transfer it and makes it a match to AI, where this can lead to a disconnect for sure. And that's again, transparency is key and integrates further back into this ethical framework, the list of sort of like items to keep in mind when choosing AI, or when, let's say, you're in a clinic and it's integrated and you have to work with it, to choose your way of working with it and what that means. And coming back to what is the core value of your profession? What is your own stance to your profession, and how does AI fit in here?
Absolutely, and I think it is that it's kind of always coming back, isn't it, to that core value of what that means to us as professionals as well. I can't see any other questions in the chat at the moment, so I've got just one more maybe before we think about wrapping up. Oh, Susanna has a question.
Yeah, I do have a question, and I really appreciate you, Stefanie and Megan, to kind of summarize more systematically this idea of using generative IA, especially during education. And this is a question in terms of, as we have mentioned, midwife means with women, and then as midwifery educators, I envision this with the students. And you with having this experience of online learning for your students, how do you envision the future of midwifery education? I have found that also, and the trusting piece, as you mentioned, from the clients and new student midwives, because they're coming from a more technological environment. Some of these clients want to go with the more senior midwife because they know being trained differently, and they know the new midwives are being trained with technology. So I don't know. I was just curious about um, how you encountered that transition of these new students using more artificial intelligence now for their education while you're trying to engage their attention into this critical thinking, and then you put it into quotation, this critical thinking part of it.
Yeah, I think we'll both have some take on this. It's interesting watching the changes that have happened in our syllabi and in our curricula over the last couple of years since the introduction of generative AI and large language models. In a way, I think that people who are working with the technology that's out there and integrating it to some extent have really examined the concept of what is the thinking that I want from the student, and what is more than just reiterating the information that's currently out there. Generative AI pretty much summarizes the information that's out there and gives it back to you. It doesn't take too many more steps. And if we're talking about critical thinking, that's what we're trying to ask, is around what are these other steps that you're taking? And so if we're looking at assessment in an education system rather than in the clinical setting, for example, then it's personal. I'll talk personally. It's personally made me change a number of my prompts in my classroom around assessment, because it forces me to go, oh, what would AI say to this? And what is missing from that AI conversation that I need to make sure that I am noting that the students should be recognizing, right? So what's that extra step? And it can even be how in a clinical setting, if the clinical setting was interacting with AI and this was the AI response that it got, then what is the part that's missing? Like that can become the assessment, right? Just knowing it as a tool that's out there and then saying, okay, so this is what the tool gives you. Where's the deficiency? Or where's the add bit that midwives bring? Because midwifery is working with birthing people and with women, and that relationship is the core of what we do. And so how does AI help us increase that relationship and develop that relationship more? That's the part where I think we need to get to. I haven't had the experience of somebody saying I don't want to work with a recently graduated student because they are trained in a different way. But I think we're coming back to, one of the things that Steph was talking around the transparency and the saying of this is how we work with our AI and this is what it allows us to do. Saying it helps us ordering supplies, I think is a great example of the back-end invisible work that doesn't impact a client interaction. Steph?
I mean, all is said, and there's so many angles to take on this, I think. From my standpoint, when I try to wrap my head around this particular question, but also the topic, it is what I accept as a fact is that AI is there. It will not go away, independent of my personal values and preferences that I have. And since it is integrated in so many tools that we are using on a day-to-day basis, tech tools, web-based or applications, it is rather impossible from an individual standpoint to ban it unless there is a federal oversight that facilitates that. And thus, I strongly believe that from an educational standpoint, we have an obligation to teach the ethics and to share what we know so that folks who decide to apply it and to integrate it know the ins and outs, the pros and cons, and have some guardrails for themselves, their own stance that allows them to navigate this. I was of advanced maternal age as a Gen X mom. And I have to now raise my children in this world, including social media. I didn't grow up with social media, and I compare the appearance of AI a lot with social media. It was great in the beginning, right? Everybody has their own voice. Everybody can speak their mind great. And here we are discussing the impact of mental health of social media on an entire generation plus. And I see this, let me use the word trend, this trend comparable to AI. I don't think this will go away. I will rather think AI might at some point replace social media because it generates content that will override existing social media spaces. And it is very important to understand how to ride this wave and to make your own choices if you want to participate or not. That's trying to express how I see it from my standpoint without, like my own preferences and values that would open a can of worms here.
Yeah, it's a whole can of worms, exactly, that sadly we don't have time for, but it is, and I think it comes down to those values, isn't it, and making sure that we're discussing it, like you say, with our future generation, not only our children but also our future midwives, of how to use that in an appropriate way. Stefanie, Megan, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much for that.